Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. This is the kickoff to the final day of Dare to Be Great 5. It has gone by fast, but it has been an excellent experience. And I've got my good friend here today. I'm excited for her session. Her name is Juliette Brown. She's a supervisor over at Westcom in Massachusetts, and she's doing a session called Do It with Kindness. Take it away.
Good morning, everybody. I am so excited to be here. I love what Ricardo does with all the Dare to Be Great conference stuff. I was here last year. Grateful to be here again today. Today, I'm going to talk to you all about how we can kind of embed kindness into a lot of things that we do every single day. And I'm going to give you a bunch of examples of different stuff that I've done that ultimately ended up making a difference in people's lives, just little small acts of kindness. So yeah, here we go. Just a little bit about me. I've been in dispatch for 9 years. My main focus is community outreach and training. I'm a certified ship magnet. I know like a lot of the younger dispatchers that I deal with often ask me how I can maintain my kindness when I've had 12 baby not breathing calls in my 9 years of dispatch. And that's just, skimming the top. I certified ship magnet. I think a lot of it is because I grew up as a cheerleader. I was a cheerleader for a decade. This is my brother and I. So I think that because of that, and it was from when I was about 4 or 5 to when I was about 14, 15. So really in a lot of formative years, it really shaped how I perceive things, how I perceive people, and how I always try to cheer people on. And then I'm a dog mom and a stepmom. And at the end of today, I will also be a cat mom. My stepson wanted a kitten. So, of course, the sucker that I am, we're getting 2 kittens. Yeah, that'll be an interesting little experience. So I don't know if I'm going to have time to read any of the comments out loud of any story that anybody gives, but I would love to hear something kind that you've done. And even if you type it all out, don't feel like it's wasted if I don't have time to read anything, because the great thing about this conference is it is available forever for replay at any point in time. If you feel like you're struggling or upset or don't know where to turn to, you will be able to come back and hear either the stories that I'm about to tell you, or you can read some of the comments about something kind that somebody else has done, and it will kind of help bring back the softness in your life. Please don't feel like you're bragging if you put something kind that you've done. I want to hear it, even if nobody else does. Definitely. Yes, Sam, I did it with kindness, story train. It'll be great. A heart filled with anger has no room for love. I pulled this quote from this book that I got, The Courage to Give. I'm just going to read a super short story from the beginning. It's in the foreword that was written by Joan London. During the 2 decades that I hosted Good Morning America, I interviewed thousands of people. But I'll never forget the morning I sat across from a woman named Virginia. Later that same morning, the man who had brutally raped and killed her 12-year-old daughter would be put to death. I asked Virginia how she was dealing with her grief and impending execution. She began to recall the rage and anguish that had consumed her life in the years following her daughter's murder. Unable to cope with her sorrow and anger, she saw her marriage fall apart. Then one day, she wept to a friend. She asked, "Why is this happening to me?" Her friend replied, "A heart filled with anger has no room for love." That was the day Virginia began to heal. Suddenly, she realized that although the murderer had taken her daughter's life, Virginia's own anger and sorrow were taking her life. Her friend told her that she needed to stop focusing on her pain and begin to count her blessings. She couldn't change the events of the past, but by letting go of the emotions that had paralyzed and disempowered her, she would be free to begin living life again. No matter what our troubles are, if we can put them aside for a moment and focus on possible solutions and imagine the joyous future, we can take the first step to finding peace within. Virginia said she felt lighter as she headed home, as though a tremendous weight had been lifted from her heart. Instead of mourning things that were missing in her life, she began to give thanks and count her blessings, her health, her friends, and her new understanding that our thoughts create our reality. This is a message that she felt compelled to pass on, and she began counseling others who were dealing with grief. And so, on this morning, Virginia was able to fondly remember her daughter's life rather than dwell on her death. As for her daughter's killer, she said that she no longer was holding on to any anger or hatred towards him. She only felt pity. So I just really loved that story. We really do create our realities. We can't fix or change some of the calls that we take or some of the traumatic things that we listen to or even some of the traumatic things in our life. But if we hold on to that anger, the only person we are hurting is ourselves. These are just some cool kindness act facts that I found. 85% of people feel happier after kind acts, and that is both by witnessing the act as well as being a part of the act, whether you're the person being kind or the person receiving the kindness. 1 in 5 people report feeling motivated to perform acts of kindness, after witnessing somebody else do the same. And if you volunteer for 40 hours a year, it can help increase your happiness and reduce depression. So that's just some cool facts. It's not just, I'm not just here to be like, look at all this cool, kind stuff that I've did. It is scientifically proven that by listening to other people be kind and their kind stories, you will want to then be kind in return. With that, though, back to a heart filled with anger has no room for love. If we surround ourselves with negative people, negativity, negative dispatch Facebook groups, it will affect our everyday lives. I found that when I was really struggling with a lot of anger to different things that I've dealt with, that being a part of some of the dispatch Facebook groups that just constantly bash alarm company dispatchers, bash their callers, talk about how much they hate their job, it really made me see life that way too. So I ended up muting those groups initially. And then after I found that it was very much affecting my mental health positively to not see them, I just removed myself altogether. I don't want negativity like that in my Facebook feed. I didn't want I was trying to reshape my reality in a lot of senses. When we are kind and perform acts of kindness, especially at work, it's not always in our job description. And that's okay. I'm not saying like don't go above and beyond if you have the opportunity to. But what I am saying is if you are going outside of your job description, you have to be fully prepared to take the consequence of it if there were consequences to arise. For example, in 2015, I was a dispatcher already, and I took a 911 call for a 6-year-old in anaphylactic shock. At the time, I was priority dispatch EMD, which, if any of you know, in 2015, we were not cleared to give EpiPen instructions. Mom was panicking. She was like, I don't know. I don't remember how to do this. My kid's throat's closing. I could hear him wheezing in the background. She was panicking. The ambulance was another 6, 7 minutes away. And I have 27 allergies. So I have an EpiPen. Um, so I said to her, I was like, you don't remember how to give an EpiPen? And she said, no, I need you to walk me through it. Help me save my son. So I walked her through how to give the EpiPen, even though technically I wasn't supposed to, and it was considered a liability. Of course, that happened to be my one call that week that got pulled for random QA. And they pulled me in and they were kind of like, what is this? You weren't supposed to do this. And I explained, like, I know, but I have an EpiPen. I've had an EpiPen my whole life, and like he would have died. And they were basically like, I understand your thought process, but that's a huge liability and we can't not write you up for this. So I ended up getting a 1-day suspension for giving these EpiPen instructions over the phone. But 10 out of 10, if I needed to do that again and I wasn't cleared to give EpiPen instructions, I would. And I would take the hit because of that kid lived. So that was a no-brainer for me. Just be aware that if it is outside your job description, you could get in trouble for it. And you have to be prepared for the consequences, because everything we do does have consequences, both positive and negative. So a few years later, I took a call from a woman on the highway, and she was getting off the highway and she hit a person that was drunk and walking home. It's actually, as a little sidebar, the person that got hit acknowledged he had called his sister to try to pick him up and left a voicemail on her phone saying that he was too drunk to drive, so he was going to try to walk home. And he ended up crossing the highway off-ramp, and this woman on her way home from her job at 3 a.m. hit him on the off-ramp. At first, when I first picked up the phone, she thought that she hit a deer. And then she got out of the car and she realized it was a person, and she started panicking. And ironically, she was on her way home from the emergency room because she was a nurse in our local emergency room. So she starts panicking and she's like, I have to call my husband. I'm going to be home late and my phone's about to die. And I'm like, ma'am, I need to do CPR. And in her moment of panic, she's not even thinking about helping him right away. She's thinking like, I have to call my husband. I have to call my husband. So I'm like, ma'am, give me his name and his phone number. And I promise you, as soon as we hang up, I will call him. But right now, I need you to do chest compressions and we need to try to save this guy. And she's like, okay. So she puts the phone on speaker, starts doing chest compressions. She's a nurse, so I didn't have to walk her through anything. So while she was doing chest compressions, she gave me her husband's name and phone number. The officers arrived and I hung up and called her husband It was 3 in the morning, so it took a few times to get through. So he picks up and I'm like, "Hi, is this Jack?" I don't remember what his name was. And he's like, "Yeah, who's this?" And I'm like, "Hi, this is Juliet from the police department." And I start with, if you ever have to make these phone calls, start with, "Your wife is okay." So I started with that because obviously I'm calling at 3 in the morning. Something's up. So I'm like, "Your wife is okay, but she hit a person on the highway and she could really use your support right now." And he's like, "Oh my God. Oh my God. She's okay though?" And I said, "Yeah, she's okay." And he said, "Okay, is the person she hit gonna be okay?" And my voice cracked just a little bit, and I was like, "I don't think so. And she could really use help right now." She's like, "Okay, I'm on my way." I was like, "All right, the entire highway shut down. So when you get close, call back and I will get the officers to direct you in." So he's like, "Okay." So he gets close, he calls, we coordinate getting him to his wife. And then instead of her having to drive to, thanks, Sam. Um, Instead of having to drive in the police cruiser back to the station for her formal statement, she was able to drive with her husband. He was able to hold her hand through the whole thing. And at the end of it, when they left the police station, um, they both hugged me and thanked me for making that connection happen. But it doesn't always have to be as crazy as tragedy. Like, it doesn't have to always be anaphylaxis or somebody getting hit by a car or something for us to choose kindness. Tropical Storm Isaias, anybody in the Northeast can tell you it hit the Northeast hard. Thankfully, up in Massachusetts, we didn't get hit as badly as some of our New Jersey neighbors and our Connecticut and Rhode Island neighbors, but it still hit us really hard. Our dispatch center, on average, takes about 150 to 200 calls every 8 hours. And at the height of the storm, we took 1,500 calls in 5 hours. After the storm, there was 150,000 people in Massachusetts without power. And during the storm, there were multiple tornado warnings. So just to give you like a little glimpse of what it was like, I can't tell you how many 16s I worked that week. And at one point during the storm, there was, what we found out later was a microburst in a neighboring community. But at the time, people calling in didn't know that. And it got reported as a possible tornado. And I happened to pick up a 911 that was somebody that was just over the line in the neighboring community. And they were like, "I see a tornado. It's heading northbound on Route 5 towards Long Meadow." And Long Meadow is one of the communities that we serve. So I remember simulcasting over all of my radios and just screaming into the radio, like, "Possible tornado coming. Seeing Route 5 northbound, take cover, take immediate cover." Sorry, I get a little emotional talking about that part, because I didn't know at the time if my responders were going to be okay. And we were 2 towns away. So in dispatch, we were fine at that time. But as you all know, our responders, we all hold very near and dear to our hearts. So that's hard to talk about. But thankfully, nobody was injured. It was just a microburst. We just didn't know that at the time. At the end of one of the 16s, the phones finally start dying down. 911 rings, and I'm met with this guy with a southern drawl, which is not common in Massachusetts. And I'm like, 911, the sign's recorded. What's the address of your emergency? And he's like, ma'am, I'm sorry. This isn't an emergency. And I was like, okay, how can I help you? And he says, I'm a lineman and I drove up from Texas to help you guys with all of these power outages. I was like, oh, well, like, thank you for, like, it's a really far drive. Like, thank you. And he's like, you're welcome. I'm locked out of my cell phone and I can only call 911. It's not going to unlock for 30 more minutes. And I'm really fucking tired and I don't know how to get back to my hotel. So I say, well, like, what hotel are you going to? I can see him on the mapping where he is, and he tells me, and I'm like, oh, you're only about 5 minutes away. It's not busy right now. What if I'm your Google Maps? And he was like, what? And he kind of like laughs a little bit. And I was like, I don't have any other calls happening right now. Like, I'll just give you directions. So he was like, that'd be amazing. So we're chatting while he's driving. And I say to him, I'm like, look, just so you know, my mapping is about 30 seconds behind. So I'm going to try to preemptively give you instructions. But if you reach an intersection and I haven't told you which way to turn, don't assume it's straight because I just don't know you're there yet. So he's like, okay. So we start talking about how crazy the storm was. And he's like, yeah, I'm on my like fourth 16-hour shift in a row. And I laugh and I was like, yeah, I feel that. I don't even know what number 16 I'm on, and I'm back in the morning. And we just kind of chatted and no other calls came in. So I was able to get him all the way to his hotel and he thanked me. And that was that. So no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. Remember, in that moment, I would have been totally justified to be like, we're in a state of emergency. This is not a 911 emergency, and hang up on him. Like, I would have totally been justified. Okay, I don't think anybody would have faulted me for that. But I could, in that moment, imagine how tired he was, knowing how tired I was. He just wanted to go to bed and I wasn't busy. So I got him to his hotel safely. Well, people, even when you know they can't help you back. So during COVID, I paid an elderly woman's phone bill. Which when I told Sam this story, Sam Hawkins, she was like, are you kidding me? But first off, it was only $30. And let me explain. It was 3 months into COVID. So it was like right when we realized that it wasn't just going away. And this woman called from elderly housing and she called on 911 and she said, my phone's not working. I don't understand why my phone's not working. I can only call 911. And I was like, okay, like, do you want me to send an officer over to help you? And she was like, no, like, all the people here have COVID. We're all in quarantine. And like, I don't want to be exposed. I don't want to expose him. She's like panicking, like, please don't send anybody here. Please don't send anybody here. So I'm like, okay. So then we start talking and I realized that her phone bill wasn't paid. She was like, it was supposed to be on auto pay. I don't know what happened. And I was like, okay, like, let me try to conference in Verizon. So I tried to conference in the Verizon pay my bill through the phone tree. But it wasn't really acknowledging the buttons we were pressing because of the conference in, and it was just a mess and it wasn't working. And no matter how many times I yelled, set a representative, None of them came. So I was like, crap. So I conferenced in Verizon. I canceled them out and I'm talking to her further. And she says, well, what if I give you my credit card information and you call for me and you pay it? And I'm thinking, all I need is this woman to get her identity stolen like 3 months from now and have her be like, well, I gave the 911 operator my credit card information. And no, I'm not dealing with that. So I say to her finally, now this is like off and on for like 40 minutes. We're trying to figure out how to get her phone bill paid and get her assistance. So finally, I'm like, ma'am, how much is your phone bill? And she was like, it's $30 overdue. And I was like, $30? And she said, yeah, it's $30 overdue. And I was like, okay. Thanks, Sam. Sam's already got the headline of if I steal somebody's identity. But I'm like, all right, give me your phone number, and I'm gonna call them and try to get something figured out. And if you don't hear from me in an hour, call 911 back because it means that I can't call you unless your phone bill gets fixed. So she's like, okay. So I call Verizon, I whip out my debit card, and I say, pay my bill. And my coworker, Nate, was sitting next to me, and he's like, are you going to pay my phone bill? And I was like, shut the fuck up. And I put in all my credit card information. And I wait like 3 or 4 minutes. I call her back, and I'm like, ma'am, like, it's the police department. And she goes, did you fix my phone? And I said, well, I'm calling you. And she's like, oh my God, you fixed my phone. Like, thank you, blah, blah, blah. Because throughout the whole time when we were trying to get her phone fixed, she just kept saying, like, I want to talk to my grandkids. I'm afraid I'm going to die in here. Like, and I can't talk to anybody. I want to, like, I need to talk to them. They're all I have left is this phone and talking to them. So I say, after we got the phone fixed, I say to her, I'm like, all right, call your daughter now. Tell her that you need the auto pay fixed and get it fixed. But I talked to Verizon. I didn't want to say like, oh, I paid your phone bill. So I just said, I was like, I talked to Verizon. I got them to fix it for a few days. So you have time to figure it out. And we will, and you can do that. Right. So sorry, I got a little distracted by Sam's identity of beloved senior citizen stolen by 911 dispatcher. But we never heard from her again. So her daughter must have helped her get her auto pay set up. Being kind doesn't have to stop with our civilians, though. For example, there was this one dispatcher that I struggled with from day one. We were both very strong-minded females, and we did not clash well. I don't want to say that we argued a lot, because we didn't really argue. It just like was constant tension between us. One day, and it got even worse when I became her supervisor. So it was just very like hard being in the same room as her at times. But one day she took this 911 call for an 11-day-old baby not breathing. And she panics, puts the phone on mute, and turns to the most senior dispatcher who's sitting next to her and says, it's a baby not breathing. I can't handle it. I need you to take over this call. It's a baby not breathing. I can't do it. And she's got full panic on her face. Like, I know that there are times that people say they can't do calls and we have to, help them and push them through and get them to do the call because we know they can do it. But in this time, seeing her face and her body language, I'm like, she's frozen. She cannot do it. The more senior dispatcher that was sitting next to her says, "It's your call, you do it." We did talk about after this call. I was like, you can't, like, no, you can't say that. Like, you gotta help if it's a baby not breathing. But in the moment, I just kind of shot the other dispatcher a look and took the phone. Come to find out, the baby, the mom was feeding him and then laid him down for a moment so that way she could get her older kid a snack. And when she came back, the baby was blue. So he had a little bit of milk that got stuck in his airway, which was making him turn blue. As soon as I started CPR and gave the airway instructions, it opened the airway right up, and the baby started sobbing. Like that wholehearted, like really strong cry that every dispatcher wants to hear. And the mom panics more and she's like, "I did something wrong. My baby's crying." And I say, "Ma'am, your baby's breathing." And at that point, she realized that her kid was going to live and she starts sobbing. So then in return, I start sobbing because I'm like, we just saved this baby. Like this baby's going to be okay. So I start sobbing to the point where I can no longer EMD the call. Like my coworkers joke that they think that I was crying more than the mom, which I deny. I was not that bad. But in that moment, because I couldn't EMD the call any further, the dispatcher that I struggled with took the call back over. And she finished EMDing the call and stayed on the phone with the mom. So that was not only a great co-save between the two of us, but it really helped mend our relationship. And I wouldn't say that we're the best of friends now, but up until she left, we occasionally bought each other coffee or each other lunch. And when she left for nursing school, I ended up writing her a letter of recommendation as her supervisor to get her into the nursing school that she really wanted to get into. So even if you struggle with somebody, there's always an opportunity to be kind, and that kindness could mend your relationship with that person. Excuse me. So this is a little bit of a longer poem that somebody I know wrote. I'm going to read it to you and then explain it after. I answered your 911 call halfway through my shift and will never forget your screams for help as your 2.5-year-old daughter was pulled from the swimming pool, not breathing. I provided CPR instructions to your sister until help arrived. I held my breath, listening to the radio transmissions on scene. They were transporting her to the closest hospital, so I reached out to the neighboring PSAP for assistance in blocking the intersection so we could get her there quicker. I did all I could that day, but she did not make it, and I am so sorry. I will never forget you or your precious daughter. 5 years later, now at a different agency, I befriended a fellow dispatcher from another agency. We just connected, and then I learned why. One day, she asked me if I had worked a drowning in said district, and my heart sunk. I answered, yes, I did. And she said, I was the dispatcher you spoke to that day to assist with traffic in the neighboring town. To you, my fellow 911 sister, I thank you so much for your kindness that day, telling me to reach out if I ever needed to talk. I never forgot that or you, and little did I know our paths would cross again. Then I understood our connection. So this poem was written by a woman I hold very near and dear to my heart, Lori. And that last paragraph is, excuse me, that last paragraph is written to me. I was that dispatcher in the neighboring town. What happened was she called to have us shut down the roads, and she was sobbing so hard, like I could barely understand her at one point. And I'm like, okay, we'll shut down the intersection. So we meet the ambulance at the town line and help escort them all the way through town, shutting down all the intersections to get the baby to the hospital faster. After the ambulance made it through town, I called her back on the PSAP. We're both single seat PSAP dispatch centers, so I was there alone. I knew that she was also in her center alone at the time, especially being that all of her responders were still on scene at this chaotic call. So I call her back and I'm like, hey, and I say my jurisdiction. She's like, hey, what's up? And I was like, are you okay? And she was like, what? And I was like, I just needed to ask you if you were okay. I've had calls like that, and I know they're really tough, and I know you're there alone. And she said, no, but I think I will be okay. And I was like, all right. I was like, well, I know I don't really know you, but if you need to reach out, like, call me back. I'm here. And she's like, okay, thank you. And then I never heard from her again. And I was like, oh my God, I'm forever going to be that weird dispatcher in her head that like reached out, that she was like, what is this person doing? Why are they talking to me? And I was like, I'm just forever going to be that weird person. And in my head, I was like, well, at least I didn't tell her like my full name, so it'll be fine. On the flip side, she said to her sergeant that she wanted to reach out, but that she was afraid that she was going to be the weird dispatcher. So neither of us reached out, even though we both wanted to. But then we both moved agencies, actually, and we connected again at our new agencies. And I was talking to her one day on the phone, and I just like recognized her voice, and I was like, I know this voice from somewhere, but I can't pinpoint what it is. And then, yes, stay weird. So I'm like, I just can't pinpoint how I know this woman's voice. And then one in the morning at like 3 a.m. it hit me. I was like, I know this woman was the person that took the call. Like, I have to ask her. Like, I know she is. I feel in my heart, I know she is. So I asked her, and she said she was. And her and I now have very special place in each other's hearts for each other. And we're the best of friends, even though we don't talk all the time, you know, how busy life gets. So if I wasn't kind that random day 5 years ago to the random dispatcher, I wouldn't have this amazing relationship and friendship that I have today with her. I'm just going to play
acts of kindness.
I'm just going to play this video really quick. It's a quick, like 2.5 minute video of Simon Sinek talking about acts of kindness and being kind.
Acts of generosity is how simple it is to make people feel good. I was walking down the streets of New York City, and a guy walking in front of me, his backpack opened and a bunch of paper fell out on the street. I didn't think much of it. I bent down, I gathered up the papers, handed them back to him, and pointed out that his bag had opened. Now, in our bodies, there's a chemical called oxytocin. Oxytocin is responsible for all the warm and fuzzies, unicorns and rainbows. It's responsible for all the warm feelings and connectedness we have with each other. Friendship, love. Huge amounts of oxytocin surge through a woman's body as she gives birth. This is what is responsible for the mother-child bond. Oxytocin binds human beings. There are many ways to get oxytocin. One of them is acts of kindness and acts of generosity. It feels good when we do something nice for someone. It feels good when someone does something nice for us. On this particular day, I did something for someone with no expectation of anything in return. I got a little surge of oxytocin. I felt good. He turned to me and he said, "Thank you." It feels nice when someone does something for us with no expectation of anything in return. He felt good. I walked to the end of the street. I'm waiting to cross the street. And a total stranger who happened to be standing next to me said, "I saw what you did back there. That was really cool." As it turns out, witnessing an act of generosity releases oxytocin, and he felt good. And the best part about oxytocin is the more oxytocin we have in our bodies, the more generous we become. It is Mother Nature's way of trying desperately to get us to look after each other. I can guarantee you that that man who witnessed what I did something nice for somebody that day simply because he saw someone do something nice for somebody that day. So what if we commit to do something nice for someone with no expectation of anything in return? Imagine what happens at work. Imagine what happens at home. Imagine what happens with our friends. But it must be genuine.
So that's just a quick little explanation on kindness by Simon Sinek. I love that. I think it's very true. If there's anything that you guys take from this today, I hope that you guys do commit acts of kindness. It is scientifically proven to make your day better as well as make everybody else's day better. And as I'll explain a little bit later, it also creates these crazy ripple effects that we never get to see or know, but it also allows us to hold that hope. If you think about it, every single time you've been kind, even if it's something like Simon, helping that person pick up the papers and let them know that their bag was open, that creates this whole big ripple effect of kindness throughout the entire world that could seemingly have no end. And anytime I feel like I've lost hope in what I'm doing or in humanity in general, because sometimes some of the calls we take, I literally wonder how people are allowed to procreate. But I'm able to come back to this and realize that every small act of kindness has this amazing ripple effect that we don't even get to fully see, but we can imagine and use that as hope to continue on our day in our hardest days. The other cool thing is kindness comes back to us in ways that we did not expect all the time. For example, over the summer, I befriended Ryan Dedman from the 911 Training Institute. We had, a few great conversations in which I was able to show him a little bit of kindness. And in return, he sent me The Resilient 911 Professional, which is a great book if you haven't read it. It talks about extraordinary caregivers and how 911 dispatchers are extraordinary caregivers. So being that we have to take extraordinary measures in order to refill our cup and help our mental health. So in return, yes, it is a phenomenal book. Ryan, you should read that next for sure. In return, though, these acts of kindness that you're doing could help refill that cup. So just food for thought. This is just some other things. Sam Hawkins said that I'm the togetherness bear because I pull everybody together. So she sent me a togetherness Care Bear. I got a random little note in the mail from a friend who also sent me a sticker talking about the different things that I've done in 911 and how proud she is of me. Also, it's come back to me at work. Last summer of 22 was a really interesting and hard summer for me. So one of my officers that I really like, she kept leaving me like little notes on my car when I was having a bad day. So this on the far right is just a picture from one of the notes that she wrote, and I keep that in my wallet, and I just have that as, just a brief little reminder. The middle picture is a Radiate Positivity sticker. To this day, I don't know who gave me that sticker. They slid it into my locker with a little note on the paper part on the back of the sticker that said, like, don't forget who you are. Because I get told that at work that I'm sunshine and rainbows and, everybody's cheerleader, like I explained earlier, cheerleader for a decade. So I got that when I needed it most. And then on the far left, somebody, while I was at work, put a thin gold line sticker on my car. And I honestly don't know how long it was there before I even noticed it was there. We don't always do a once around our car every time we get in, but somebody felt compelled to leave that on my car, which was really nice of them. So kindness does come back to us in ways that we never expect, never realize, and not even always from the same person that we showed kindness to. The last story I'm going to tell you I hold very near and dear to my heart. It's really the driving force of my kindness, I would say. In 2015, I was dispatching and I took this 911 call for a woman in her 60s that was having chest pain. She was home alone. So after I EMD'd the call, I stayed on the phone with her. The ambulance was still like 8 or 9 minutes away. So I stay on the phone with her, and some people, when you stay on the phone, they don't want to talk, and then some people are talkers, and she was a talker. So she starts telling me stories, and she told me about her kids and her grandkids and how, like, her daughter was going to give her such crap for calling 911 instead of, like, calling her, but she didn't want to bother her daughter, the whole 9 yards. And she asks me if I have any kids, and I laughed, and I was like, nope, the closest thing I have to a kid is I have a childhood dog. And she laughs, and she's like, that's not the same. And I was like, I know. But I had a Great Dane in an apartment growing up. So I told her a funny story about having such a large dog in such a small space. She laughed, and I laughed. And for the moment, it felt like we were just friends talking on the phone. I almost forgot I was at work. We were just like chit-chatting and laughing and making jokes and everything. And then she got really serious, and she was like, how old are you? And I had just turned 22, so I was so proud. I was like, I just turned 22 like 2 weeks ago. And she's like, oh my God, you're so young. And I kind of laughed, and I was like, yeah. And she's like, and you're so kind. And that's when it started to kind of like throw me for a loop. And I was like, okay. And she was like, promise me you'll never lose your kindness. And in that moment, in my head was like, wait a second, I'm on a 911, and this woman is talking to me about kindness. Like, I was so caught off guard that I kind of just froze. And she said again, promise me. So I promised. And right after I promised, she died. I heard the phone fall out of her hand, and I heard her hit the ground. She fell out of the chair that she was sitting in. And I like screamed, like almost like blood curdling scream into the phone. And I was like, ma'am, if you can hear me, push a button, make a noise, move something, anything, ma'am, please answer, please answer. And I'm like freaking out on the phone, trying to get her to answer me. And I was met with silence. So I tell the dispatcher, I'm like, I think she lost consciousness. So they say, okay, they let the ambulance know. The ambulance gets on scene, and I'm still on the phone, still trying to get a hold of her. No answer. I hear through the phone the paramedic tell the basic, tell them CPR in progress, we need a second medic. And at that point, I hang up the phone, and the basic goes over the air and asks for the second medic. They do CPR, and they were unable to revive her. The only regret I have about that call is that at the time, it wasn't our policy to necessarily ask people their names, so I never got her name. But here was this woman who used her last words to tell me not to lose my kindness. And the last words she ever heard was me promising her. So even though this woman that I don't even know, I've never even met, is no longer here, I'm able to continue on her legacy of kindness that I'm sure she had if she used her last words to tell me that. And I'm able to help create ripples with no logical end every single day in everything I do. And when I try, or when I venture away from that, I remember her and I try to pull myself back and think like, this woman's no longer here. I can still make a difference though. The picture on the left is the angelic symbol for kindness, which I last year finally got tattooed on me. I wanted something to remember her, but I couldn't figure out what. And then I found this kindness symbol. So I have that tattooed on me also as a reminder. Yeah, Gary, I do think that I was meant for that call, and I'm very grateful in a lot of ways because I was receptive enough to be able to pass on her legacy, as opposed to if I was somebody else that could have been grumpy or not listening or didn't want to talk to her about her kids and her grandkids. She would have never said that. So everything I do every day, I try to remember her and act with kindness. So if there's anything that you guys do today at any point in your day, I really hope that you just find a way to spread kindness, no matter how big, how small. It will create these ripple effects that you can just imagine and hope and dream about, and it will come back to you in so many more ways than you will ever be able to imagine. So that's my LinkedIn QR code. Thank you, Sam Hopkins, for teaching me how to do that, or else I wouldn't be here. That's my email address. Feel free to email me with anything, questions, comments. If you want to share a kindness story, I would love to hear it. If you don't want to put it in the comments, feel free to email it to me or message me on LinkedIn.
So I needed a couple seconds there before I came back on really quick. Oh wow. Amazing. As always.
Thanks.
Excellent, excellent job. That was just all of it. I wrote down so much myself over here and just reading everything in the comments and stuff. I mean, from the moment that I met you just a couple years ago and just everything. I mean, we went through that week at the ranch
Mhm.
and when we were sitting there at the airport and we were talking and stuff, just listening to you, getting to know you and everything. I remember telling you, like, you were the first person out of everyone and those who put in for Call of Papers. I said, I want you to be a speaker because you're something special.
Thank
And it has been amazing ever since. And just the entire message. This was an excellent, excellent way to start out the final day of Dare to Be Great 5. Excuse me, as I get myself together here. But those who are watching, make sure to send Juliet, your story, follow her on LinkedIn and everything that she's doing. She's doing some amazing work, and damn, I'm proud of you, dude. Well done.
Thanks, Ricardo.
So for everyone who is here, we're going to be going to the next session here in just a moment. It's going to start at 9:15, and that'll be with Josephine Rios. She's the founder of Latinas of 911, and she's going to be doing a session called "You Don't Just Teach, You Inspire." So I'll see you all in the next one here.